welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard. I'm your host, Kev. You can follow me on Twitter at dynasty_goat. With me tonight, as always, is my amazing co-host, Matt, who you can follow on Twitter at MattFFDynasty. Good evening, Matt. How are you?
Evening, Kev. Yeah, I'm doing really well, thank you. Got a really exciting show coming up. Just been talking to his guest before we come on air, and he's already grilling me. So yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun, this show, and can't wait to get started.
I like the link there. You said grill, and you'll notice that our other co-host, the Dynasty Grill, Ali Cook, he's not with us tonight. I think he's on some sort of convention in Birmingham. So best of luck to him on that, whatever he's doing. I think he might be doing some bookkeeping, which is his job. So if you need your accounts doing, then reach out to Ali. He'll be more than happy to balance your books the best he can. But yeah, enough about Ali. We've exhausted that. We'll talk about our amazing guests that we've got today. We've got a superb show lined up, and our guest is the founder and CEO of Under the Helmet, co-host of the UTH Dynasty Show, and a writer and Dynasty host at Football Guys. We give a warm Fantasy Wildcard welcome to Chad Parsons, who you can follow on Twitter at Chad Parsons NFL. Good afternoon, Chad. How are you?
Hey, great. I feel like my accent doesn't quite blend into the show, but I'll try. Yeah, great to, I've been interacting with you guys on Twitter over the years, and just great to join the show. And we got a lot of topics. I mean, aren't these the easiest shows? Right around NFL free agency, right around the NFL draft. I mean, it never disappoints. And with all of their trading, it makes dynasty trading and player value a whole lot more fun.
Exactly. It's the best time of the year, and just let the audience know that Chad, he moved home today. So that kind of fits in with the topic of today's show, where we'll be recapping the first week of free agency from Dynasty point of view. What are guys that'll be moving to new homes as well. So last week we caught up on the early moves of free agency. We spoke about Trubisky, Edmonds, Connor, Kurt Gallup, Cedric Wilson, Jack, Engerman, Uzoma. As we record now, it's Sunday the 20th of March, officially day 5 of free agency. And we'll now run through the key moves from the second wave of transactions of free agency. And first off, we're going to kick off with getting your thoughts, Chad, on a massive trade we had a couple of days ago, the Deshaun Watson-Browns trade.
Yeah, NFL, just one quick point there. I mean, a lot of people say, wow, giving up so much for a player, that big contract, but unicorns at the quarterback position are a dying breed. It's like an oasis in the desert. If you have one, you're not going to die. You're not going to, dehydrate yourself to death. And if you have one, you got a chance. The AFC West now has all the quarterbacks, but yeah, I think that Deshaun Watson changing teams, we knew this was in the offing. And I go back to all the conversations I had on podcasts last summer when things were knee deep in depression and Deshaun Watson might go to prison. He might never play again. So much downside to Deshaun Watson. And then he fell, I think it was to QB 14, 15, 16, somewhere in that range. He's now come back. I do think the bottom is behind us, because even if he gets suspended, we sort of have a TBD arrival date of 2022. And 12 months ago, we had that same sort of thing. Can you stomach the lost year? That lost value of just not. You have Amari Cooper that's already there, and a lot of people were hand-wringing that Amari Cooper, this is going to be horrible news. It's horrible news until you get a quarterback upgrade and things are great again. Let's throw a parade. But I do think Amari Cooper, this might be a chance for his best season ever. And Deshaun Watson, I don't think you have to say a whole lot. He was in that discussion right there with Patrick Mahomes and 2 or 3 other quarterbacks of saying the best young quarterbacks in the NFL before all the off-field stuff. And I'm not going to say that is under the rug and it doesn't matter, but we play Dynasty. So it's about setting lineups and it's about player value. So I think it's 2 separate conversations, and the Dynasty discussion is a lot more clarified now, because he's one that had 2 or 3 high-level seasons early in his career. And at quarterback, that's pretty much the crown jewel profile that Herbert is on that track right now. Patrick Mahomes has already been, he's already passed the test. He's passed the final exam. He's, play a few more years and it's Hall of Fame, Patrick, So I think that people forget, because it's out of sight, out of mind, how good Deshaun Watson was on a pretty poor Houston team. And now you have a pretty darn good Cleveland team that was really missing a trigger man.
Yeah, I think we've all got his thoughts, haven't we, on Deshaun Watson and the whole situation. But like you said, we'll keep it to the fantasy side of things. And as you mentioned, there's a possibility we don't know what's going to happen in terms of suspensions looking at next year. If you just take a look at the contract, there's signs pointing towards that there's likely going to be a suspension early on, but it's just guesswork at the moment. We don't know until we get any further news on it. But just again, talking from a fantasy standpoint, we know that the upside, it's incredible with Deshaun Watson is a perennial top 5 quarterback. Averaged 22.5 fantasy points per game in the 54 games that he's played so far in his career. So, as I say, we know he is an elite quarterback in terms of fantasy. You touched on the fact that they brought in Amari Cooper as well. That's only going to be beneficial for Watson and what he can do over there in Cleveland. Obviously, we all talk about the Browns and we're all concerned in terms of fantasy. We know it's a run-heavy team. We like the running backs over there, but we do tend to worry about the pass catchers. But now with Deshaun Watson over there and Amari Cooper, I think we're all starting to get a little bit more excited about these Cleveland Browns. And I think, he's definitely taken an increase in his value. Just looking at keep trade cut, he's gone up to the QB7 now. You just touched upon what his ADP was before that. Looking at DLS February ADP, QB15, like you just said, so going mid third round in startup. So we've seen the bump in value already. So Chad, my question back to you is, how early do you think he's going to now go in startups, and would you be comfortable drafting him in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I currently have him at QB6 in my rankings, and I think that was pretty aggressive. And did you say QB7 is where he currently is, like a few recent drafts? Yeah. So I think honestly, it's really competitive. A lot of people have Mahomes, Allen in some order at 1 and 2, but that next grouping of Herbert, Prescott, I know Prescott's actually a little lower than that probably, but Russell Wilson included with his recent trade and bumping back up, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, maybe Kyler Murray, but it's really tough to start moving a guy up or down 1, 2, 3 spots before they play more games, because frankly, you wouldn't be surprised of those 5, 6 quarterbacks if there's any shuffling of any order. So I'm personally not the biggest on Burrow, for example, or Lamar Jackson from where's the big contract? Where's the allegiance? Where's the progression as a dominant passer in the NFL? Same thing with Kyler Murray. So that's why Deshaun Watson gets the bump over me. I do think Russell Wilson versus Watson is a really tight vote for me, because Wilson older, but he's certainly not old. I think a lot of guys get to 33, 34, 35 years old at quarterback, and they think they're done. They could have 5 to 8 more years. And frankly, in our dynasty lifelines, how much will our leagues and lives change in 5 to 8 years? I think people worry too much about that 25-year-old quarterback versus a 33-year-old quarterback. But I think that discussion of maybe it's Prescott, Wilson, Watson for me, that's a little tougher than saying, is Lamar Jackson there or over him or Kyler Murray? So I'm a little more bullish than the marketplace. And I just would remind folks that, like you said, perennial top 5 type guy, if Watson on a per game basis, whether he plays 10 games or 13 or whatever it is this year, if he puts up top 5 per game numbers as a mobile quarterback that can throw with good weapons, David Njoku for the win, by the way. Yes. How long have we been waiting for this opportunity? Now they're just going to sign Austin Hooper, but they're going to figure out some other tight end to give some egregious contract to. But with Deshaun Watson, I think if he posts in the top 3, 4, 5 of per game, he's going to vault ahead of a couple guys I mentioned. Russell Wilson, he might not get there fantasy-wise, even if the team is very successful. Dak Prescott now with a little lighter on the weapons, so let's see. But I think he fits in that top 3, 4, 5. I am at 6, and part of that is he going to miss some games? What if it's been a while since he's played? So I think all those factors. But again, 12 months ago, if you embraced risk, and Dynasty is all about how can you get a discount on a Deshaun Watson like player in premium format? The only way is when this happens. So you have to be open to saying, hey, if we roll snake eyes and let's say he goes to prison for 2 years, this alters his entire career arc. Again, that's the only way you pay QB14 prices for this type of profile. Yes, you could get lucky maybe like the NFL and draft a rookie, but who's to say Kenny Pickett or Malik Willis or any of these guys this year or next year turn out 3 years from now? And by the way, you have to wait 3 years, have a profile like this where you go, okay, I'm pretty sure he's good now. So Deshaun Watson, it was a lot of the, what was going to happen a week or two ago with those proceedings and a few more hurdles to clear. But man, you don't have risk that he's not a good football player. The Browns just backed up the truck and said, we'll give you everything. Just don't leave the state lines. Yeah. We want you, Deshaun. And honestly, on the football side, that should be good enough for us.
Yeah, I personally love the move. He's going to be borderline first round probably first round pick in startups. I think he's an ideal target for productive struggle teams in startups as well, that if he's going to miss half season, that actually helps their strategy as well. Bit of good news as well, I did manage to get Watson for the 101, but I just had to add a little bit on. I spoke about it last show. Straight up, it didn't work, but added a second in and a few thirds, I managed to get that one done. So
I got him for, as one data point, we got into a 2-quarterback league and we traded the pick that was Justin Fields for Deshaun Watson. So obviously the time that he missed it last year didn't really hurt us because Fields was in and out of playing, but also in and out of fantasy viability. But that was the same thing in the QB 10 to 20 range. And you say, this is a discount. And I think big time profiles, there has to be some sort of, the moment they tear their ACL or they're going to miss games or they're having a down year. Aaron Rodgers, I always remember 2-3 years ago, he threw for 25 touchdown passes. They go, he's done. That's it. He's horrible at football. And you can get a discount on him. And now he's 2 MVPs in, and now he's a big contract later. And everyone remembers how good Aaron Rodgers was after one down year. Quarterback is probably the most exploitable position when you have that down year. Phillip Rivers had him. Eli Manning had him. These quarterbacks that are just, I mean, they last 10, 15, 20 years in terms of that overarching profile. And yet the down year with a bunch of interceptions or low touchdown total, and all of a sudden they drop 5 to 10 spots. And you're like, why? They're still a very, very good player and one of the most durable at the position. And they all have bad days, if you will.
Indeed. So the Watson trade, that was massive a couple of days ago. And another huge trade that went down a couple of days ago as well was the Devontae Adams trade to the Las Vegas Raiders. So if you watched our show on March 2nd, our guest Sam Holtz actually predicted this. She must have some sort of time travel in her back pocket. But great shout, matching the need from the Raiders, needing a wide receiver, an alpha wide receiver, plus linking up with former college QB Derek Carr. So personally, I thought that when Rodgers re-signed that they'd find a way to make Adams re-sign as well, but it didn't end up that way. It seems that he preferred to give up the opportunity for a Super Bowl ring to meet up with his good old mate in Las Vegas in Derek Carr. It must have been fun for them to shower with each other at Fresno State. But yeah, I'm a bit cheesed off with my Rodgers shares. I'm not fancying MVS being his wide receiver one as it stands, but nobody can tell me this move's good for Adams for fantasy from that point of view. A lesser QB, more competition, crazy tough division that we know about. Plus, he's going into his age 30 season. He's going to a new scheme. He's going to a head coach that whiffed in his previous opportunity to be the head guy. So you can see that I'm low on Adams, but I want to get your thoughts, Chad, on what effect you think the Adams trade will have on the rest of the skill position players for the Raiders.
Sure. I do think competition for targets is probably the first thing to be discussed situationally. Derek Carr is a perfectly functional quarterback. I'm not going to say he's on Aaron Rodgers' level, but you have Darren Waller, who is a high volume guy. It probably hurts everybody just a little bit. Hunter Renfrow, I thought that's a career year. I mean, the likelihood that a guy with his lack of pedigree turns into Julian Edelman, turns into Wes Welker, pretty much only Tom Brady does that for the long term for these slot centric guys. And but Derek Carr, I don't think is that. And they have nothing else at wide receiver. Now they have a lot else at wide receiver. I think what this does, Devontae Adams, I think in that maybe wide receiver 8 to 12 range of cost, that he's going to be a very acquired taste. I think there's going to be half of a dynasty startup league that isn't going to be interested. Here's what I do know, though. In an existing league, Adams owners probably aren't going anywhere. You have them. And again, half the league isn't going to be interested. Half the league probably goes into the year going, I'm not contending. Well, that bodes well for the other half that probably want to make the playoffs. So I think with Adams, the upside is not wide receiver 1 overall. I do not think that. They could have been, teammates in undergrad, grad school, medical school, going back to, Strayer and Phoenix University online. They could have been going to school together this entire time. And I still don't think he has wide receiver 1 upside anymore. That said, I think the floor is very high. And I think a lot of times people overrate what the spectrum is for a player. Like saying a wide receiver is pretty much going to finish, say, wide receiver 16 or higher, just to throw something out. That's very comforting. Like, I know we all want the absolute peak. Let's find the Cooper Cup season, but it's one guy a year, if that, of the perfect storm of health and touchdowns and efficiency and quarterback, all that type of stuff. So Adams may not have that in him anymore, but let's remind ourselves, he's still an alpha wide receiver. We don't question the targets. We don't question the level of offense. They're going to need to post a ton of points. I don't think they're going to be able to play the way they did of Josh Jacobs for 3 yards, Josh Jacobs for 3.5 yards, Josh Jacobs for 1, and then running the ball 3 straight times inside the 5-yard line. And fingers crossed, I hope we score. Like, they're going to need to post points in that division. And so I think they're going to have to throw the ball around the yard, and that's great for Derek Carr. I think he's probably the biggest benefactor here. But I think that the upside and ceiling of Renfrow, Adams, and Waller all take a hit. But I still have Adams in the top 6 or 7. And I'll say this. So again, rebuilders, I mean, you probably lost 5 to 10% of what you could possibly get, but this is not the time of year to sell him anyway. So you should be contending. If you have Devontae Adams, you had him last year, you've had him this whole offseason when he was projected to be on the Packers. Aaron Rodgers, you had a window where you felt really good. If you wanted to sell, you could. But I think if you have him and you have any hopes of contending, you hold them and you get all the way to the season. You're happy to start him. But if you want an exit, a 29-year-old wide receiver, it's not March or April or at your rookie draft table is the time to sell. So I think I'm a little above the market, and I think he deserves, just like Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp might take a step back in terms of what his ceiling is. Obviously, we kind of saw his ceiling. But I think those are two names you put together in that 29, 30-year-old age bucket and say, we probably have already seen their peak, but their floor is still like a high wide receiver 2, if not a low wide receiver 1 upside from there, but it's probably a tighter band of production for this year.
Yeah, it's a very interesting signing. Obviously, it's great for Derek Carr, like you mentioned, and you did mention target competition, and that brings us nicely on to the next free agent, first free agent sign actually of this show, the other two being trades. So who's the next guy you want to talk about, Chad?
We got Juju Smith-Schuster. So he is one that talk about out in the woods the past, couple years now. I mean, he was a rising phoenix. He came into the NFL. What I love about this is he couldn't drink. He was so young, like Brandon Cooks. He could not drink when he played his first NFL game. And all of a sudden, he starts producing as the Robin to the Batman of Antonio Brown. But now it's, he's not athletic enough. He's just a guy. But we've seen the Steelers offense kind of go in the tank. And they have talent. Deontay Johnson is not a hack. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. And for Juju, this is about best case scenario. He wasn't going to really go to a place and we perceive him to be the number 1 guy. This wasn't going to be, if he signed with Jacksonville, I don't think, just like Christian Kirk, I don't think anyone would say, 180 targets, he's going to be a dominant force in this passing game. But the thing I thought was Kansas City and Buffalo, who is going to be the wide receivers that go there if they do add to the position? Those are the notable situational uptick guys. So for Juju Smith-Schuster, I still don't really think he has a wide receiver 1 ceiling that he hit before. But with Kelsey, with Hill, I think everybody else can basically push off into the ocean. Mecole Hardman experiment, I think, is largely over. They can finally just give him 2 targets a game and say, just be happy, go sit over there and break a touchdown every 2 months. That'll be great. But I think Juju Smith-Schuster is going to have a really easy time. Because think of this offense. They can do whatever they want, right? I mean, they choose not to run the ball. They choose not to go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and that's their choice. But I think that between Kelsey getting attention, Tyreek Hill scaring everybody, even at 28 years old, I think Juju Smith-Schuster is going to have an easier time than when he played with Antonio Brown, who drew coverage. So he may only get 90 targets, 100 targets, 105 targets, but he still has a chance to finish in the top 20 or 24. That said, I don't think he's going to get into the top 12. So strangely, and we'll see how much this adjusts, I actually may be behind the market, but based on before the trade, I was definitely firmly ahead of the market by a little bit, in those wide receiver, I believe it was the 40s, somewhere in there, where he got a lot of chance. He drifted now into my 30s, like a wide receiver 35 to 40, which I still think is pretty aggressive for a guy that you say doesn't have a wide receiver 1 ceiling. But this is, I think, again, other than landing in Buffalo, Kansas City, those 2 spots were really the ones for Juju that it's worked out for, because if he didn't land there, let's say he went to the Jets or he went to Jacksonville after they made all those other signings or something like that, I just think there were a lot of bad cards. If you're doing river cards in poker, this is one of the good ones that actually got you a chance to win the hand.
Yeah, to be honest, I've heard that Juju and Mahomes, they've wanted to link up for ages. I personally can't wait to see the TikToks between Juju and Jackson Mahomes. It's going to be exciting to see. But I'm just as sure his brother, Jackson's brother Patrick, I believe he's going to be ecstatic as well about the arrival of Juju. You've just touched upon it. He's going to be that wide receiver 2 over in Kansas City. But I see all over Twitter, all in the community saying, "Oh, just look at the production of the Kansas City wide receiver 2 under Mahomes. It's non-existent. You don't want any piece of that." But my argument back to that is just look at the players that have been the wide receiver 2 over there: Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson, Mecole Hardman, like you just touched upon. I mean, they're not players to get excited about. Juju Smith-Schuster, we've seen what he can be. Even as you mentioned, when he played alongside Antonio Brown, the fact that he was able to produce so well as that secondary option, I think I completely agree with you, Chad. I think this is a great spot for him to land in. He's now going to be that bona fide clear wide receiver 2. We know that this team likes to pass the ball, like the second most in the NFL last season in pass attempts per game. There's going to be plenty of opportunities for Juju, even with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce getting theirs. Sadly, it is only a 1-year deal that Juju's getting, but I still think he's got a chance to prove himself, and over in that offense, I think he can do that. So, Chad, I'm just wondering, what do you think his value is now in terms of 2022 rookie picks?
For this year, again, I think taking Juju over those first round wide receivers. So if there's 5 of them, if there's 6 of them, 4 of them, whatever it ends up being, and they're probably going to be in that mid to later first round of a super flex, that you'll probably get a look at one of them. They rarely drift to the second round, but 110, 111, 112, you're probably going to look. I prefer Juju Smith-Schuster over 1 or 2 of those options. Yeah. Now, all of those options, I think the others at 21, 22 years old are more insulated. I don't know if Juju comes back to even being considered a top 20 or 25 dynasty asset at wide receiver. I think that ship has sailed. So if you're like a market value slave and you're worried about this and you kind of build your roster, you want to be liquid, he's not the guy. 108 or 107 drafting one of those wide receivers is going to be more of the answer. 2 things I was thinking of when you're talking. One of them is this whole wide receiver 2, it can't produce in this offense, X, Y, or Z. I guarantee you it's specific on the player, like you mentioned. Yeah. I mean, well, if it's Byron Pringle, yeah, should we be surprised? if it's Sammy Watkins, who hasn't produced since Buffalo, yeah, we shouldn't be surprised. But if you get, like, for example, if Amari Cooper went there, I guarantee you the wide receiver 2 would produce. If AJ Green 5 years ago went there, I guarantee you he would produce. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, a lot of times you get into this coaching carousel, coaching scheme type stuff of like, so-and-so coach does not use X, Y, or Z. Like, oh, they don't use their tight end. Well, first, can we see a list of who the tight ends are? Because I guarantee if I'm a coach and I have one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history, I would figure out a way to get him a lot of touches. And it's the same sort of thing when you say, oh, well, Kansas City doesn't run the ball. If they had drafted Jonathan Taylor over Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think they would run the ball more than they currently do. So you might say to some degree that could be true, the radius of that argument, but I hate ones like that where you start looking back and you're like, well, they had a bunch of trash at quarterback. No wonder they didn't throw the ball. Like, yeah, I'd run the ball half the time, on snaps too. So that's one thing that just grinds me when people start making arguments of like, everything changes every year. And you want to talk about following a coach and they never use tight end. When you're like, oh, well, their best tight end was, Delaney Walker before he even, did anything with another team. And it's like, well, no one knew. He 4 years as a backup. Like, so this type of stuff always grinds me when it's like, well, because he's attached to this coach, I can't buy into the wide receiver 2 or the slot receiver or the tight end of the offense.
Yeah, I've got to say with Juju, you hear a lot of people saying that he's not going to get the targets because I'll go through Kelce and Tyreek Hill, but Juju's going to get 120 targets in my eyes. I think that.
Well, what if he averages 16 yards per catch and he has 9 touchdowns because it's so easy in that offense? What happens then? Who cares how many targets he gets, right? Based on what I just said, I mean, he's still going to be a wide receiver too.
Exactly, and you've also got the added benefit that if something happens like an injury to Kelce or Tyreek Hill,
Bingo, exactly. Tyreek Hill pulls something. All of a sudden, you get a month of Kelce and Juju. It could be wheels up top 5.
I think I'm back in. I
was already high. Yeah, we convinced him.
I was already high. I was high, and then I was sort of a bit low after the signing the 1-year deal. It just made me think that if he does flame out, what sort of deal will he get next year? But
he's playing for the money. He's playing for the money, Kev. Yeah, 1-year contracts are not a bad thing for us because they are highly, highly motivated.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, and this is another guy that's He was highly motivated. He's now got a long-term deal. So I'm hoping he will be highly motivated still. But who's your next guy, Chad?
I don't think there's much to discuss here. It's Chris Godwin. I mean, he is one that, it's funny, right when he was coming out, I was neutral on him. Then when everyone was kind of on him in his early years of like, this is a guy ready to break out. Now, ultimately he did. He had a top 5 season, but I think this is a guy that, especially now that he posted 2 strong years, 2 top 10 seasons in his career, that's really where we talk about having a stable quarterback profile. When you're a wide receiver 1 for 2 seasons in your career, especially if it's in the first 5-6 seasons, like Chris Godwin, that's when my heart just starts to flutter, because and I might be slow to react to some of these players, but when they get the profile, it's interesting just to see there's always 1, 2, 3 players that now you become high on and the market seems to not care that much. Maybe it's the injury with Chris Godwin. Maybe it's the fact that he didn't get all the way home. He was a wide receiver 1, 2, 3 or something overall 2-3 years ago, and he hasn't been that since. But I love the high floor guys. And when you say Chris Godwin's going to be coming back this year, he and Mike Evans with Tom Brady, and honestly, just one ancillary point. What if Brady plays again in 2023? Like this whole oh, it's 1 year and done. You start thinking that a player is 1 year and done. Dynasty discounts everything around that player to a point where you're like, well, it's an even value if he plays 1 year, and I crush the trades if they play more than 1 year. So if Brady plays beyond this year, he's a value. Evans has been a value for a while, but Chris Godwin, though, underrated. He's basically a bigger, better version of the Edelmans, the Welkers, all these guys that have been security blankets, and he loves that guy. So the fact that he's back and the fact that he's on a multi-year deal, that can't hurt Brady's chances of returning for another year following this. So I think Godwin is in that giant bucket. If you want, beyond Justin Jefferson, beyond Jamar Chase, between wide receiver 3 for me and wide receiver 15. I really think that is such a tight grouping, and Godwin is A, in that grouping, B, Mike Evans is in that grouping. But if you put them all together, all I would say is who's expensive and who's cheap. And some of the guys like CeeDee Lamb is crazy expensive within that bucket. But then you look and you're like, Mike Evans, super cheap. Chris Godwin, to some degree, is cheap within that group. Devontae Adams might be cheap in your league. But whoever is cheap in that group, I'm interested in. And Godwin, I got eyes for you, because you're in that, like, a lot of people perceive you in that wide receiver 10 to 15 range. He's 26. He's had 3, I think, top 24 seasons, 2 in the top 10. That's the profile you want. He's not 28, 29 years old where people stop caring. And he's not 22 where he's done one thing kind of well for 1 year that makes you wonder if he was a one-hit wonder. So he's in that perfect zone, just like Stephon Diggs was, say, a year or 2 ago, where he's right in his prime, but productive, good situation. He checks every box, other than the fact that I guess if Mike Evans wasn't there, people would think it was better. But I'm pretty all in on Chris Godwin, outside of saying, when will he be fully healthy and producing at a high level this season? It might be earlier, but it might not be till midseason.
Yeah, I think he's been a little bit unlucky with those injuries. He's had the finger injury and then that torn ACL. It was a bit of a strange collision that caused the injury. And personally, I just love his role in the Bucs offense, playing more than half his snaps from the slot. He's working against the easier matchups, the high percentage targets. And a lot of people don't want Godwin to actually move away from the Bucs for his dynasty value, but I actually prefer him staying in Tampa alongside Evans, and even better news with Tom Brady around. So I'm just going to go down the injury route for this question, Chad, and just get your thoughts on, with him still recovering from the injury, are you more likely to want to roster Godwin in a startup or in an existing league, or are they both neutral for you?
Yeah, it's pretty neutral. I would say that in a startup, I'm not as concerned with how does my September of the first season go, or how does October go in the first season. And I've said many times that the first year of a startup draft is the hardest to win, because there's so many variables, and you've got some teams that go dead red of almost a redraft type strategy. So they have a little bit boosted odds, but for those that are looking to build longer than a year or 2, or more a blended approach, that it can be tough to beat those other teams that basically sell out and they might leave the league, but they do have an enhanced chance to win in that year 1. So a guy like Chris Godwin, the profile buying, I think is the big key there. So I would gravitate towards that, honestly, in a startup draft, because like I said, I mean, a lot of people put a lot of focus on, I spent pick X on this player and it's September 14th. I didn't win and I drafted Godwin and he's not playing. And that hurts. They really don't like that, the not getting early returns or drafting an injured player. But like we talked about with Watson, I mean, sometimes that's how you get a little bit of a discount, a little bit of that door opening to actually get someone like Chris Godwin for a value as opposed to paying full sticker.
Smashing. We're going to keep it with the Bucks now and go to another wide receiver that's recently signed there. Maybe he'll get a bit more run early on in the season with Godwin recovering from the injury. Who's your next guy, Chad?
Yeah, Russell Gage. And he's one that's been sneaky. He's been a high floor player in terms of there with the Falcons. He was producing a little bit when they had better weapons. He was producing last year, but then he got hurt a little bit. So he's one that this is going to be a shorter term thing, in my opinion, because when Godwin comes back, whenever he is fully healthy, I think Gage takes a step back. But I think if we storyboard this and we say Godwin, not really himself, maybe until midseason, we might be looking at a September or first 3-4 games where Russell Gage is like top 24 in PPR. So this is, if he's like, for example, if you have some injured players, especially at wide receiver, or we get to July, August, and you're like, I don't know what I have early in the season, Russell Gage is going to be that type of bridge from early season to who knows what he provides. But could he be injury away if Mike Evans misses time or Godwin? Or what if Gronkowski comes back and he misses time? We don't know what they're doing at running back really yet. So all those factors, I think Gage benefits from maybe any of them occurring. He's going to be in the top 3. Sorry, Jalen Darden, you're kind of done. We can, like they keep replacing you or keep, and Tyler Johnson as well. So Russell Gage, I think, again, early season, yes, thumbs up. Ultimately, I think he will turn back into an inconsistent pumpkin that's going to be tough to trust. So later in the season, unless he gets an injury or two, I'm not as interested. But if you're saying I get into my rookie draft, I don't really like my options, and I start looking around at like 306, I don't know if he'll cost a second. Maybe he will. But if you get to like 306, 310, and you're like, maybe I can trade for a veteran running back I like, injury away, or I just don't like my options. Maybe you can trade back, trade for a third next year and pick up Russell Gage as that add-on piece. That could have a lot of value and actually help you buy a win or two in the first 8 weeks, let's say.
Yeah, he's coming off a really solid season last season with the Falcons. Probably his best season today. If you look at it from a fantasy points per game standpoint, it's his best season. He's proven to be quite efficient as well when he has been on the field. He ranked 13th amongst wide receivers in yards per route run. So as I say, when he's healthy, when he's on the field, he is pretty efficient with the opportunity that he gets. It's just as you say, he struggled a little bit with injuries last season. Now moving over to the Bucks, he's going to be the wide receiver 3, like you touched upon when Godwin is healthy. But he does have that opportunity early to have some relevancy in terms of fantasy. We've touched upon obviously Brady going back, Godwin if he does miss time early, and then just Tampa Bay as a whole. It led the league in pass attempts last season. Can't see that changing now with Tom Brady back, keeping all the weapons as well in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And then just looking at Gage's current value, wide receiver 63 on keep trade cut. I think he can easily outproduce that, especially like we've been touching on. With Godwin out, I think he's going to smash that quite considerably. So, Chad, I do have a question back for you, but it involves a bit of math for me. So, just stick with me as I go through this, and all the listeners stick with me. But he averaged 12.5 fantasy points per game last season. So, if we just turn that into a 17-game pace, that would have been wide receiver 27. I know other players obviously missed time for and stuff, but stick with me, Chad. This is going to be a good question for you. So, saying wide receiver 27, I just want to know in 2022, and just speaking for next season, can he be better than that or worse than wide receiver 22? What's your feelings?
I'm gonna go later or lower than wide receiver 27, just because I think that his centric point of production is going to be less than half a season. So I do think during that half he certainly will be higher than 27. But then my fear is it gets discounted a lot and dragged down by, say, wide receiver 55 or 60 when Evans and Godwin and who knows what else they add to weapons later on, or if they're all healthy. That's my worry with Russell Gage, is that the floor is going to be a lot lower, but yet we will have predictable weeks. So that's good news.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy, Russell Gage. I think he's definitely those that if you've got him in a league, he's someone you can move off, you can pivot from after a month of the season. If you're getting cold feet on him, you don't like his profile. We're a dynasty show, but I'm guessing Gage is going to be a nice pick for redraft leagues as well. So another guy that might be a great pick for redraft, or shall we say dynasty year 1, if you're thinking about going all in, like you mentioned a little bit earlier, Chad, is your next guy, and who have you got?
Yeah, Allen Robinson. I mean, this is one of the big splash signings of the past few days. It seems like we've had 2 or 3 big days and then 2 or 3 days in free agency that haven't been that impactful with the news. It's kind of you're scouring, and then you find a little nugget or two if you're doing like a daily show or something like that with the recap of the day. But Allen Robinson to the Rams. And the ancillary point is Robert Woods traded away. Now, Robert Woods was going to be coming back potentially later than the start of the season with his injury, but being traded away, that means that the calculus kind of stays the same. Is he going to be better, worse, or the same than what Robert Woods' role was? Now, he's a different player, so I don't want to put in player styles, but Cooper Kupp, is this going to hurt him a little bit? Allen Robinson, what does he have left? Now, this wasn't a 1-year deal. This was a massive 3-year contract, significant. So I always say 3 years, lop a year off. It's probably more of a 2-year deal in practice. And maybe they have some sort of painful out after 1 year. But let's not forget that Allen Robinson is 29 years old for coming up this season. And it's been a little stretch here since he's been productive, or the Allen Robinson we remember. Good news is best quarterback of his career. It's not overly, a competitive point on that. And he has been a wide receiver 1. He is one of those proven profiles. Now, what's his role going to be? Is it going to be he's not as dynamic as Odell Beckham to, deep overs and yards after catch. That's not really his thing. So is it going to be 50-50 balls? Is it going to be more of a downfield presence? At 29, does he still really have that vertical 20 plus, 25 plus air yards down the field type game to him? So I think for this, could he get there at wide receiver 1? Yes. I think he's going to be more of that, wide receiver, say 10 to 30 is kind of a nice meaty range for his finish. Now, the problem is if you're not using him and you again, market value chasing, he's 29, unless he literally goes Cooper Kupp here and finishes in the top 1, 2, 3 of the position. He's not going anywhere. He's not going up. So you have to know this is a player for your lineup, a player for you winning games, not so much for you having liquidity in the market and like, haha, I can get 2 first-round picks. I don't care what he does this year. You're not getting 2 first-round picks. Maybe if it's a Rams-only league, that may be the best chance you have. So for Allen Robinson, I just think he's old enough that the book has already kind of been written for what his upside is in the market. But I'm pretty excited because I think I'm not a Van Jefferson fan. Tight end Tyler Higbee has been a placeholder for me. I am pretty interested in Jacob Harris if he ever gets going. It was preseason usage only last year for him. I know he got dinged up, but I do think they don't throw to running backs a ton. This is an opportunity for literally Batman and Robin. And I would not be surprised if this is an offense where they have 2 wide receivers in the top 10 or 15. That this strikes me as the type of offense and these 2 type of players that it could work. So the biggest thing for me is Allen Robinson was left for dead for a lot of folks. And I know it was painful last season because you could not start him. Absolutely. If we go back to October Twitter, it's like, is Darnell Mooney better, or would you prefer Darnell Mooney in Dynasty than Allen Robinson? And I think this allegiance that the Rams, with the new contract, fitting in, perfect system for him, and a big-time quarterback, let's go back and poll check. Because the big-time players, they get big-time rewarded by the NFL. We talked about that with Deshaun Watson. Juju Smith-Schuster, a 1-year deal, so the NFL isn't totally on board with him. Allen Robinson, they know what he's done. So I just think with Robinson, the ceiling is pretty high. And again, let's just rewind to last year on how low it was of having him on your bench, cannot start him, and just hoping for greener pastures. And here we are. The grass is up to our freaking necks.
Yeah, I've got to say I do love Allen Robinson. I don't think I'll be paying a late 23rd first and Donovan Peoples-Jones for him, but I know that was a popular tweet a little bit back. But yeah, I'm really happy with the move to the Rams. Obviously, tied to Matt Stafford.
Well, let's play this one out. What if Cooper Kupp misses time? We just play this out with Juju Smith-Schuster. He could be top 5? If Cooper, and guess what? Cooper Kupp, I'm not calling for injuries, but when you have the magical season of Cooper Kupp being healthy, seeing so many targets, being so productive, I don't play this game, but you wouldn't be surprised, right? If a guy plays basically every game, every snap, he's a warrior. The next season, is he going to be that fortunate? It's a game of luck, right? I mean, he was put in harm's way a lot. So if that occurs, Matthew Stafford, Allen Robinson for the win.
Definitely. I think Robinson's a gambler, like you mentioned, Chad. He's not done it for a couple of years. He did basically nothing this year when he was healthy. He was left for dead in Chicago. But I just want to get your thoughts on Odell Beckham, do you think he'll be back with the Rams after this signing, or is it just going to be those two guys as the main men?
They're printing Monopoly money, so apparently they have money for everybody. Everybody, come on in, Odell Beckham. What do you want? 2 for $25? Let's get you in here. Come on, you little knucklehead. Anyway, so if Odell Beckham comes back, I think, with Beckham, how often has he been healthy? So I think the long term, again, not injury prone. I don't like using labels like that. But when you just look at the overarching, he has not really been healthy for long since he was breaking out long ago with the Giants. So I would say just, overstating his impact of maybe siphoning things away from Kupp, from Robinson. Let's slow our momentum on statements like that. So I do think if Odell Beckham comes back to the Rams, that Robinson might be available for, does he move 5 spots down in the perception and the market value for the position? That would be the thing I would look for. And maybe if Cooper Kupp takes, now he's wide receiver 10 or 12 or 14 or whatever it is, because of his age, those would be the things I would look for, not intrinsically buying Odell Beckham for like wide receiver 40 to 50 prices. I would probably do the other two things to explore the market, not so much Odell Beckham's going to be a top 24 player this year.
Indeed, we're going to take we spoke about a lot of wide receivers there on the run. We're going to now move to a different position. First running back you'd like to discuss, Chad?
Oh, Dolphins. What are the Dolphins doing? Let's sign Chase Edmonds before Leonard Fournette and a bunch of these other running backs. And then we have Myles Gaskin still, who turned into a complete shadow last year. But let's bring in Raheem Mostert. And I don't have a big pulse on the market or who's talking about this type of situation. But I was out on Raheem Mostert when he was expensive. I think he probably went for a first-round pick at his peak, and he was probably a top 50, 60, 70 startup pick. When he was with the 49ers, he was running his 4-3s through that perfect system of Shanahan's. But then, he did that for part of a year, and then it never really translated to the next year, durability, all that. We got Elijah Mitchell coming and happening. So all that happens. And so with Raheem Mostert, I think he's the sneaky play. Of these guys, Chase Edmonds has never really been the starter in an NFL offense. He's always been a committee guy. Myles Gaskin, I think it's fair to write him off to some degree of saying they clearly don't like him. They literally said, Duke Johnson, strap it on, because we need somebody late last year, and then his name is not Myles Gaskin. So that's all that's on that depth chart. Raheem Mostert has done something in the NFL to a higher level than Edmonds for any stretch of time. And Myles Gaskin were years removed from him being relevant on that team, to be fair. So Raheem Mostert, he's that exact guy. We talked about trading maybe a later 3rd round pick. Hey, I don't like the rookie draft options. These are like day 3 guys. Am I really going to be sticky with this roster spot? What if you were to get someone like Raheem Mostert deep in the dark corners of your rookie draft picks? Because you got a shot at a week 1 starter. You got a shot on maybe the most talented guy. And the Dolphins have not shown this whole time any allegiance to saying, let's spend a 1st or 2nd round startup pick, NFL draft pick on a running back. Let's splash the pot. I think they really do view spending what they did on Chase Edmonds like the biggest splash move. We're going to be geniuses. That's going to solve. That's a road to nowhere. They're going to fix nothing with Chase Edmonds. So Edmonds, prove me wrong, but so far you've proven me correct in your entire career. And James Conner, he's still lapping you on the depth chart. He's across the country. He's still lapping you. They signed James Conner for big money, and they said, Chase Edmonds, go anywhere else. So Raheem Mostert, again, I was out on him for that 18-month span when he was hot in San Francisco because the profile didn't really match the price. Now he's almost free. He may be on waiver wires post rookie draft, just because everyone's on Chase Edmonds. People are still rostering, Myles Gaskin. So I think with Raheem Mostert, the upside is there, the perfect storm of just, how about we just say we don't know what's going to happen on this depth chart, but if something does happen, I guarantee you the odds aren't the highest from the community on Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, it was only his last show, wasn't it, Kevin? We were talking about Chase Edmonds landing with the Dolphins, but now, as you say, Raheem Mostert comes in, and this is a really intriguing one. Obviously, we know he's coming in from San Francisco, just like the new head coach over at the Dolphins in Mike McDaniel. He's bringing over that 49ers system that he had there as the offensive coordinator. We know what a great scheme that is in terms of what it can do for fantasy and running back. So it's easy to get excited about this. And like you just touched upon, Chad, with Mostert, he has that skill set that's really going to excel in this kind of system. He's got that speed, as I say, that really shone through in San Francisco. Coming off that injury, though, there's maybe some concerns. It was a knee injury. Does he still have that explosiveness? He's getting up there in age. I believe he's touching 30. So you do start to now worry about a guy getting up there in age, and with the tools that he has, can he still produce that next season? But I'm with you, Chad. I think if I'm picking anyone out of this backfield, and I know I'm contradicting myself because
who's
I said
cheap? Who's cheap?
Exactly. Yeah. And this is exactly what I said with the 49ers last year as well. When it came to Elijah Mitchell, he was the cheap guy. Everyone's going for Trey Sermon. You just take the cheaper guy, don't you? And you tend to reap the rewards with that, and with the quicker guy as well. And this is exactly the same situation. I was just saying, Kev, last week I was glowing about the fact that Chase Edmonds was there in Miami, just because he was basically the only running back there. But a little bit like Jonnu Smith weren't it last season? Just a couple of days later, it gets destroyed, and in comes Mostert.
The best 24 hours of Jonnu Smith's dynasty career until Hunter Henry signs.
Exactly, and it's a little bit of the same with this. And to be honest, like I've just said, I think Mostert's the guy that I prefer out of the two. Chad, how do you think this backfield plays out then? Do you think that Mostert is going to be the guy, and then maybe Chase Edmonds just going to be used maybe as that pass catching down back?
Yeah, I think the unfortunate thing is Chase Edmonds, can he stay healthy? Raheem Mostert, can he stay healthy? This may be a situation where who do we have available this week? And I think the real key, though, is Chase Edmonds is probably still costing a mid-second round pick, maybe even venturing a little higher than that. And Mostert, if he's a round and a half, 2 rounds cheaper, that's the play. And let's not discount one other thing. I know they signed Edmonds, but they might view Mostert as a complete flyer. What if they do draft somebody in the first 3-4 rounds? That should kind of scare you off of situations like this, which speaks to the situational nature of the value for all of these players. So that's the thing of, you can't get too high on Edmonds. Why? Maybe they signed who knew that Mostert would be the guy that kind of scares you a little bit of saying, I'm not quite sure about this, which means if they draft one of the first 3-4 running backs off the board, that would scare you a lot more than Raheem Mostert. So yeah, Mostert, he may never be healthy for more than a month again in the NFL. And you have to be open to that. And that's why I said, like 310, 405. Throw that type of thing if you are interested and you get all the way to May and they didn't draft splash the pot, and draft the running back in the first few rounds.
Indeed. And we're going to keep it on the running back theme. Obviously, Raheem Mostert, we spoke about them. We're going to keep it with another guy that I'm really pleased that he stayed where he did for his value. So who's your last guy you want to speak about as a free agent, man?
Yeah, Cordero Patterson. This took a while. We're still waiting on Fournette. I think at Chuck's watch, Ronald Jones, I'm not up on the news the past few hours leading up to kickoff here, but Cordero Patterson was one where we all in unison kind of said, the Falcons unlocked something with Patterson. The Patriots used him as a returner, but this is the first time we kind of felt comfortable with Patterson on offense in the NFL. It took till 29, 30 years old, but who knew? Get the ball in his hands and he can do damage just like as a returner. So this is the best case scenario. Now, who knows what they draft? Who knows if they're done? But this is the best opportunity. I know he went up and down last year in terms of is he a wide receiver masquerading as a running back? Is he a running back that hardly gets used in the passing game? It was a lot of week to week machinations of how he was being used in that offense. But here's what we do know. You could use him as a wide receiver. I know on my fantasy league, maybe on other platforms, he was dual, but he was a guy that was hard to keep out of your lineup. He was found money. I remember thinking that, who was the backup? Everyone thought the backup in Atlanta was
Mike Davis.
No. Well, no, Mike Davis was a starter, but the backup was somebody else going into last year. And so, but Patterson was a relic. And looking back, that was a really bad process because Patterson had the highest upside of anybody in terms of athleticism, size. If the perfect storm happens, we just didn't see it for 8 seasons. So part of that was who would see it coming. The other part was they listed, I remember in the preseason, they listed Cordero Patterson as the running back 2 on that depth chart. And frankly, all I do is dig into August depth charts looking for value, and I missed that one. I was like, no, that's a type. No, that's just because they don't like everybody else. Well, it doesn't matter if they didn't like anyone else. The answer was Patterson. So I think, now he's listed as a running back. So that kind of hurts him a little bit. I enjoyed starting him at wide receiver a little better last year, but I think universally he's at running back, but still top 24 is in play, whether Davis is the starter, whether someone else is the starter. I think there's big upside here. And frankly, for Patterson, he was going to fall through the floor if he didn't go back to Atlanta, because we don't know if any other team is going to try this experiment or continue on this path that we saw last year. So I think Patterson is someone that if you've held him, honestly, I was surprised at the very beginning of the year and late before the trade deadline. If you weren't contending last year, you couldn't really get, I think I saw, some of these executed trades of like maybe a late first to a contender or a second plus something else. I didn't have that experience. I tried to shop him a few spots. Any of that time period, could not get it. So if you're saying, should I take a 3rd round pick or hold Cordero Patterson to see if things get better? You hold Cordero Patterson, because one season is going to be better than that pick. So I'm really intrigued by this. Now, does Atlanta add something and splash the pot like we talked about with Miami? Maybe. But I think with Patterson, you take your shot. Unless you can get, like, if you could move from 205 to like 110, maybe you consider it. If you can move from 110 to 106 and you tier jump, then maybe. But otherwise, you have them. This is why you have your whole roster. If Patterson doesn't work out, it shouldn't kill you at all. It shouldn't really affect your team. He's not in your top 15 players. If he is, you probably have bigger issues on your team than oh, well, Patterson didn't work out. I could have traded him for 303. That's not on your dynasty to-do list. It's that your team is not strong enough without Patterson. So I really think he's a hold unless you get to a new zone of a rookie draft that you say, I'm getting a full tier better and a more durable asset like a day 2 running back. Maybe it's one of the first 2 quarterbacks off the board in the top, say, 16 of the NFL draft. If we get that, maybe it's a 1st round wide receiver. There's certain checkpoints that I would say you're probably historically should do that. And again, we may get into the season and Patterson's a flip yet again. So this is the best case scenario. I still don't know if people are going to be comfortable, though, giving you the exit point I just outlined.
Indeed. So we'll now move on to the wildcard selection, which we're going to be getting Chad to pick out one player that will be his fantasy wildcard, the player that will improve his dynasty value the most in 2022. And this is a bit of a curveball, Chad. So I'll let you take it and give us your wildcard selection.
Yeah, it's a theme of the show, but I was very confused. I was like, so I asked 5 questions, like, so who can I pick? I don't know what the parameters are. And then I picked 5 players. You said no to all of them. So I picked another one. And I ended up going with a rookie. So apparently that's not super common. And honestly, a month ago, this is a player I would not have picked. So that makes it a perfect choice, because a player that I was most concerned about, with that someone in Devi that was drafted heavily. I mean, I think at times after maybe his freshman season, he was considered the wide receiver 1 for his class. Since then, he hasn't really been viewed that way. Injury was part of it. This last season, he basically didn't play. And that's George Pickens. He is one that my biggest concern was he is going to bomb, in a bad way, the NFL Combine or his workout, if he even works out. See, I was of the ilk that if you're a threat at wide receiver to run in the 4.6s or 4.7 or something, don't run. Don't ever run. Don't ever have anyone of the scouting process see you on a treadmill, see you at a gym, see you running with, playing ball with your dog in the park or playing with the kids in the yard. Never see you running until they draft you, because you want it to be a secret. So anyway, with Pickens, he absolutely aced the combine. And this is where we didn't know if he was going to participate athletically. So that completely changed everything for me, because he was productive. I love the ball skills. I love the player. I still don't think on grinding the mocks, and you look at some mock drafts and all this stuff, I still don't think he's in round 1, but I don't know how he gets out of round 1. So that's one where it doesn't make sense to me right now. And I think the next month or so, and maybe it's still in combine catch-up mode, but I think he's in the top 3 or 4 wide receivers of the class. And I think it's a big tier, and you can make a strong argument. And I wouldn't say a word. If you said if you said George Pickens, not Treylon Burks or one of these other guys, is my wide receiver 1, I wouldn't say a word. I have comments for everybody about everything, but I wouldn't say a word if you said George Pickens is my wide receiver 1. I had him pre-combine and Superflex like mid-second on my big board, and now he's in my top 10. I don't make moves like this post-combine, but when I have one key question for a player, like I think he might be a poor athlete, and he checks that box and checks it to an extent where you say, oh, well, I have no concerns. This might be a complete lid lifter. When you combine his ball skills, if he gets a quarterback that trusts him, he could be a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. And his comps now, for me, include guys like Sidney Rice, CeeDee Lamb. I mean, the athleticism was a huge deal for a highly productive player where it's, the film folks, they just go watch the tape and they're going to put play after play of him just monster catching over guys where you say, imagine if you can run by them as well. So the fact that he checked that box for me puts him in consideration, in my opinion, to be in the top 1, 2, 3 wide receivers of the class. Would not be surprised. They're all in the same tier for me. I have 5 wide receivers in the same tier, and it's behind running backs and stuff like that because I think it's that crowded. It's that contested this year. There is no Jamar Chase. There is no Jalen Waddle. I don't think we're going to see a guy go top 5 or so. So that means they're all similar, and that, in my opinion, makes Pickens underrated.
Yeah, I think you're allowed back on the show now after that one, Chad.
Absolutely.
Me and Matt absolutely love that pick. We're pretty high on him as
well.
Big
Bulldog fans, are you?
He's the second coming of AJ Green, isn't he? So
yep.
big fans. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the show where we've recapped the first week of the 2022 free agency from a dynasty point of view. So before you go, Chad, please let the audience know where they can find you and anything you'd like to plug.
Absolutely. So I do a couple of weekly shows out there under the helmet, as Kev mentioned at the start of the show. Also, I'm the host with Jordan McNamara on the Football Guys Dynasty show. So I get plenty of time recording that in addition to all the UTH Dynasty premium podcasts. If you want to support those shows, you can follow on patreon.com/UTH. So I record a lot. I get a lot of reps. I remember when the Audible, which is considered, one of the gold standards, been around since the beginning, I love the story because they used to record on their answering machine or something, some sort of tape device over a telephone that plugs into the wall for people under the age of 30. All of that sounds like German or Japanese. So, but they were doing that then. I started in 2011, which was still very early, but it was still early enough that I had to call in on a cell phone to begin my time doing podcasting. But I figured out all the premium shows I've done basically adds up with all the weekly shows to how many they've done on the weekly Audible show and all their additional Audible shows over time. So they started a lot earlier, but I'll just say, Sig and Cecil, I'm catching up. So I record a ton of Dynasty audio content. I would say, I do a ton of rankings, trade calculator, all the requisite stuff you would expect for UTH. But I would say if you enjoy audio content, especially like 5-minute, 8-minute, 10-minute shows on one central thing, one dynasty trade, or hey, Allen Robinson was just traded. Boom, there's a show. Or Deshaun Watson was traded. Boom, 15, 20-minute show on what happened, that day. Things like this time of year, NFL draft. I would say humbly that, I'm one of those resources in Dynasty that I go the extra mile to do all of that audio content for the premium subscribers. So that's definitely where you can find me, which is probably in your earbuds, just like this show. And I just want to thank you guys for having me on, and just a really fun ride to be able to play not co-host, but play just guest. I love it.
Thank you, Chad. And have you got any final thoughts on today's show, Matt?
Yeah, I just want to repeat what Chad just said. Basically, go back to him. It's been a pleasure having you on, Chad, and it's been a lot of fun. Even though they did me a little bit of stick before we came on air, kind of made me having to fly, not looking at my notes, just to try and impress you there, Chad. So I hope you're impressed by that. But yeah, great show, Kev. Really enjoyed it. Good to go over the big moves that have happened recently, and Chad's wildcard selection. It's got me really excited now for the NFL draft coming up, and obviously we're going to talk about it in the upcoming show. So looking forward to it.
Indeed, and just echoing what Matt said, thank you for coming on, Chad. It's been an amazing show. We've had a lot of fun. You've spoke so well. You did all the work pretty much, Chad. So thanks for making it an easy show for me and Matt. But yeah, you're more than welcome to come on again anytime. You've been an amazing guest today. Thank you very much. So yeah, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Wildcard. Also, leave us a 5-star podcast review if you've enjoyed today's show. It really helps with getting us exposure to a wider audience. And join us on our next show where we'll welcome on the amazing Garrett Price of Dynasty Nerds, where we begin to turn our attention to the NFL draft, highlighting some of the studs and duds from this year's class. So thank you once again. Have a good one, and we'll see you soon.